You know that feeling, right? You start a new movie or a game and something just clicks. It feels familiar, but in a good way. You've seen this kind of story before, and yet you are absolutely hooked every single time. Well, that's not an accident. There's a secret formula, a kind of blueprint behind our favorite adventures. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works. I mean, just think about it. You see it everywhere. There's the reluctant hero, just minding their own business, who gets swept up into a quest they never, ever asked for. Or, the grizzled detective standing over a crime scene. They spot that one tiny little detail that everyone else missed, and bam, they're pulled into this massive conspiracy. Or how about a ragtag team of misfits, all coming together to plan the perfect heist? That one big score that's going to change everything for them. Yeah, these patterns feel familiar for a very good reason. So what is it about these stories? Why do they feel so right, so deeply satisfying? It is definitely not just a coincidence. There is a really powerful structure working just under the surface. And that secret? It's called a narrative loop. It's basically a formula, a repeatable cycle that our brains are just wired to love, whether we're watching a film, reading a book, or, and this is key for us today, playing through our very own solo adventures. I mean, just take the hero's journey. It is probably the most famous loop of all time. A hero gets a call to adventure, they face some trials, and they come back totally transformed. We've seen it 1,000 times, right? The details change, but that core loop, it stays just as powerful. Okay, so let's get down to it. How does this whole idea apply to the world of gaming? And especially when you're the one in the driver's seat telling the story in a solo role-playing game? Well, this is where the game loop becomes your absolute best friend. So, at its heart, a game loop is just a simple formula that gives your story a beginning, a middle, and an end. But don't think of it like a rigid script. It's more like a helpful guide. It helps you generate the exact kind of action and story beats you're hoping to experience in your game. And most of these loops, they kind of share the same DNA. It all starts with a discovery. You find a quest, you stumble upon a mystery. Then comes preparation, where you get your gear and make a plan. After that is engagement, where you actually go and tackle the problem. Then you get the twist, that big boss fight or a shocking revelation, which leads, finally, to completion. And the best part is, you can slap that framework onto almost anything. A monster hunt loop? It takes you from tracking the beast to that epic final fight. A crime mystery? It's all about finding clues, piece by piece, until you unmask the bad guy. These are classic, fun, and super reliable ways to structure an adventure. Okay, this is where it gets really, really good, especially for those of us who love solo play. You don't have to just sit back and spot these loops in other media. You can actually build your own. You can become the architect of your adventure's structure to create the exact experience you're looking for. The Mythic system gives us a wonderfully simple blueprint for this. It's 3 steps. First, you define the main goal, what's the whole point of this adventure. Then, you break that goal down into smaller, thematic phases. And finally, for each phase, you just list the expected scenes, the things that probably need to happen to move the story forward. So, let's take a relic hunt. The goal is obvious. Find the relic. A key phase would be something like follow the clues. And the expected scenes under that, well, they're exactly what you think. You discover a clue, you pursue that clue, and then you fulfill the clue. See? Super simple. Totally logical, and it gives you a clear path forward so you're never stuck wondering, what now? But here is where the absolute magic happens. Because if you just played through your expected scenes one by one, well, that would be pretty boring and predictable. The real genius of this system, especially for solo play, is how it builds in surprise. You have a plan, but then you test it against reality, and sometimes reality has very different ideas. This happens in 2 main ways. You might get an altered scene. This is pretty close to what you planned, but with a little twist. Maybe you find the clue, but instead of finding it in a dusty book, a mysterious stranger hands it to you. But an interrupted scene? Whoa, that is a total curveball. A completely random event that just crashes the party and sends your story spinning in a new direction. This is how a structured plan creates genuine, unscripted moments of discovery. All right, let's see how this blueprint works in a real game. We've got a great example here from a post-apocalyptic adventure. Our character, Skylar, has a pretty simple goal. She just wants to scavenge for some supplies in the wasteland. So the player quickly builds this scavenge the wasteland loop. The goal is just scavenge for stuff. Phase 1. Find a cool place to look. Phase 2, deal with whatever danger is lurking there. And phase 3, hopefully, find the goods. Nice, clean, and simple. So, Skylar finds an old military bunker. Phase 1, complete. Now she moves into phase 2, deal with danger. The player knows an expected scene is encounter a threat. The big question now is, what is that threat? And there we go. The loop delivers exactly what was expected. A threat appears, in this case, an old security robot. Skylar can handle that. The loop is working perfectly. Everything is going according to plan. But then, the system decides to throw a massive wrench into the works. Instead of the next logical scene, the player rolls an interrupt, a completely unexpected event. An automatic tank, way more dangerous than some rusty robot, literally smashes through a wall. The stakes just went from 0 to 100, not because the player planned it, but because the system injected a moment of pure, unadulterated chaos. That right there, that is solo gaming gold. So what does all of this really show us? It shows us that having a plan, having a blueprint for your story, doesn't kill creativity. In fact, it's the very thing that makes true, emergent, jaw-dropping surprise even possible. And this really gets to the heart of why this is so powerful. On one hand, you have total freedom, the blank page, but that can feel, well, directionless. A game loop, on the other hand, gives you a structured blueprint with clear goals, but it intentionally leaves room for the dice and the system to create those unforgettable moments of surprise that make a story really come alive. I think the best way to look at it is this. A game loop is like a recipe. You've got the basic steps and ingredients laid out so you know you're going to end up with something good. But the truly amazing, memorable flavor, that comes from the unexpected spices, the happy accidents that you could have never planned for. So that's the real power of the blueprint. It lets you create a story that makes sense and has direction, but that can still completely shock you. So the only question left to ask is, what's the blueprint for your next story going to be?